So, regarding background and context, Point Pleasant Park is a 75-hectare urban forest situated on the southern tip of the Halifax Peninsula in Canada. The event occurred in September 2003 when Hurricane Juan caused extensive damage to the forests within Point Pleasant Park. Hurricane Juan was a Category 2 storm that hit the Halifax harbor with wind gusts up to 185 kilometers per hour, marking it as the most devastating storm to hit Halifax since 1893. The hurricane destroyed an estimated 85% of the trees in Point Pleasant Park, resulting in a loss of approximately 70,000 trees. The dominant forest type prior to the hurricane was an Acadian forest, which was considered an overmature near climax community. The Acadian forest is a transitional forest type found in Atlantic Canada. There are species from both northern boreal zones and southern temperate hardwood forests. It is characterized by trees like red maple, balsam fir, and eastern hemlock. The recovery was and still is slow to return to pre-disturbance structure. The Acadian forest was not adapted to strong windstorms, making it especially vulnerable to Hurricane Juan. Shallow soils, tall trees, and weak-rooted species like red spruce and hemlock further reduced resilience. As a result, Juan caused major blowdowns and canopy loss, altering the forest's recovery. This study examines how the forest community changes over time. It focuses on the ecological processes driving these changes and predicts how the community may develop as the forest approaches its climax stage. The research investigates changes in the density of dominant species from 2004 to 2025. It explores the causes of these trends and predicts how dominant species may respond as succession continues. Metrics including total density, average DBH, species richness, dominant species density, Shannon diversity, and the two dominant red spruce, red maple species were analyzed. It explains the ecological mechanisms driving these trends and forecasts future changes in this metric as the forest approaches climax. Some key concepts to keep in mind throughout this presentation: succession is the gradual change in species and community structure after a disturbance. This experiment is based on secondary succession on sites where life existed, but a disturbance did not destroy the soil. In addition, a climax community is a stable late successional community that persists until disturbed. Some ecologists once viewed it as a predictable, self-sustaining superorganism. It is composed of long-lived species that are resistant to damage.
Methods, field and site description. Point Pleasant Park is a coastal mixed forest system on the Halifax Peninsula that was severely damaged by Hurricane Juan in 2003. Thousands of trees were uprooted or snapped, creating ideal conditions to study long-term secondary succession. 6 20 by 20 meter plots were established in the most heavily disturbed areas. These plots were intentionally chosen because sites with strong hurricane damage saw the clear successional changes. Procedures. In each permanent plot, all living trees with a DBH greater than 2.5 centimeters were identified, measured at 4.5 feet above the ground, and counted by species. This method provides consistent measurement of forest structure by mass accumulation and dominance patterns. Ground floor sampling used 12 randomly placed 1 meter square quadrants per plot. All species within each quadrant were identified and their percent cover recorded. Random sampling reduces bias and captures rapid changes in understory and herb layer communities. For every variable that was chosen, a linear regression was performed using the years 2004 to 2025 as the predictor variable. Regression outputs were used to assess whether each metric increased, decreased, or remained stable over time. Linear regression is ideal for detecting long-term patterns in forest succession. These regression results form the basis for interpreting trends in the forest.
So, how has the overall forest community changed over time and why? To analyze this question, we looked at the total tree density data. It showed us that it was highly significant and not due to chance. Total tree density has risen over time, indicating that the forest community has become more abundant since the initial disturbance. This increase reflects strong regeneration, with many new stems establishing in the high light, low competition conditions of early succession. As canopy gaps gradually closed, continued recruitment contributed to a denser and more structurally complex forest. The upward trend in density also shows that the forest is actively rebuilding its understory. Overall, growing total density signals a recovering and maturing forest community shaped by natural successional processes. So, what we predicted, what will happen to the overall community as the forest moves towards its climax community and why? Well, to answer this question, we analyzed species richness, and our data told us that it was highly significant and again, not due to chance. Species richness will increase during mid succession, but it will eventually plateau as the forest approaches its climax community, reflecting the filling of ecological niches and increasing competitive exclusion under a mature canopy. Species richness is expected to continue rising as the forest moves through mid succession, but the rate of increase will slow as ecological niches fill. And competition intensifies beneath a closing canopy. So once the mature canopy limits new establishment, richness will stabilize rather than increase indefinitely. This high but steady richness reflects a balanced community composed of species well adapted to late successional conditions. Together, the pattern of rising species richness followed by leveling indicates that the forest is becoming more diverse, structured, and ecologically stable as it approaches its climax stage.
These two linear regression analysis graphs show the change in density of the dominant species in 2004 and 2024 over the period studied. 2004 dominant species, the red spruce, increased only slightly, while density of the 2024 dominant species, the red maple, increased dramatically over the 20-year span. This data reflects natural succession in which the early colonizing species becomes less dominant and the late successional species establishes dominance over the forest. Gradual replacement of red spruce by red maple indicates the community's progression towards a more mature and stable successional stage. Moves towards climax community, stronger interspecific competition for resources will occur. At climax community, the dominant species will have outcompeted other species, and the population of the early successional species will have declined. There are three main steps to this process. First, the early successional dominant species declines as resources become more limited. As they decline, the late successional climax species increases, likely because of adaptations that allow them to thrive in the forest conditions. Finally, the system moves towards a stable state, and the community becomes dominated by species that are best suited for the stable, low-disturbance conditions of a mature forest. The species composition stabilizes into the climax community unless a disturbance resets succession.
Shannon diversity has increased steadily from 2004 to 2025. This tells us that the forest has become more biodiverse as it continues to recover. The main reason for this increase is the rise in species richness. More early and mid-successional species have been able to establish in plots over time. Evenness stayed relatively stable, which means the increase in diversity is coming from more species being added rather than big changes in which species dominate. This pattern matches what we expect during secondary succession. As the forest approaches its climax community, Shannon diversity is expected to stabilize or even decline slightly. Diversity usually peaks during mid-succession when both pioneer and mid-successional species are present, but as the canopy closes, light availability decreases and early successional species can no longer regenerate. Stronger competition allows shade-tolerant late successional species to dominate because fewer species can survive under these conditions. Species richness declines and the Shannon diversity levels off or drops. The climax forest will therefore be more stable, predictable, and dominated by small groups of long-lived species.
The trends in the Point Pleasant data show that the Acadian forest is in the stage of late succession. Factors such as a high average DBH, decreasing values of pilose evenness, and a decreasing Shannon diversity value all show signs of late succession. Pilose evenness is lower in late succession due to increased dominance by highly competitive species. Even with high species richness, the community becomes unbalanced as the best competitors thrive. Shannon diversity decreases or plateaus in late succession after peaking in mid-successional stages. This is due to a few highly competitive, dominant species outcompeting others. Shows the results of the regression analysis on the total density, average diameter, species richness, Shannon diversity, pilose evenness index, and the two dominant species, the red spruce and the red maple. The regression analysis shows significant trends in almost all of the factors studied. The total density increased highly significantly, with tree density increasing by about 7.9 individuals each year, meaning more trees are establishing over time. The species richness is increasing as well, suggesting that more species are colonizing or persisting. The Shannon diversity and the density of both dominant species significantly increased as well. Pilose evenness and the DBH data both showed decreases, although only the DBH data's decrease was statistically significant. Pleasant Park Acadian Forest is filling in with more trees and more species. The trees have smaller average diameters, suggesting younger growth. An increase in the Shannon diversity and a slight decrease in evenness shows that one or two species, for example the red maple, may be becoming more dominant within the community. Both dominant species are increasing, with the red maple increasing at a much faster rate. Human disturbance, fragmented landscapes, and management practices are all factors that can affect succession of urban parks. Trails within urban parks expose species to constant high levels of disturbance, and non-forest species could be dispersed by humans during recreational activities. Fragmented landscapes create small, isolated habitat patches that are able to support fewer plant species. Additionally, mowing, weeding, and other management practices of removal may alter the composition of the park and inhibit naturally dominant species. These frequent disturbance events disrupt successional processes. People have had a connection to Halifax and the parks within it for many generations. The traditional two-eyed seeing approach combines Indigenous knowledge with Western science for a fuller understanding of ecological management. This view includes the spiritual and cultural value of forests beyond just their economic use. Mi'kmaq perspectives are now a part of developing forest policies in Nova Scotia, ensuring that traditional knowledge is considered along scientific consultation. These added perspectives have been used to shape new policies, such as the old-growth forest policy.
So, looking at the impact of invasive and non-native species on metrics, they can strongly disrupt ecosystems by outcompeting native organisms, reducing biodiversity, and altering total density. In regards to species richness and diversity, introduced species can decrease species richness by eliminating or suppressing native species. Hybridization and competition can reduce native genetic identity and proportional abundance, lowering overall diversity. Ecosystems disruptions can also further harm native species. Lastly, looking at total density, non-native species can reduce native densities through competition or herbivory. Some invaders reach very high densities on their own, furthering suppressing natives. Effective management, like removing invasive species, can help restore native communities. A key takeaway is that invasive species generally decrease native richness, diversity, and abundance, highlighting the need for early detection and management to maintain healthy ecosystems.
The emergence of red maple dominance will speed up decomposition processes and create nutrient-rich litter. Red maple leaves are rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, which will increase the nutrients in the leaf litter on the ground when the leaves fall. Red maple leaves also decompose faster than red spruce needles, leading to faster incorporation of organic matter into the soil.
What causes evenness to stay stable while species richness declines during succession? In late succession, a lot of the species that drop out are rare early successional species that were already at low abundance. When those rare species disappear, the main dominant species, still share the community in roughly the same proportions. So evenness stays about the same, but because there are now fewer species overall, species richness goes down while evenness remains relatively stable.